Thank you. Wow.
So, welcome to
Thank
the
you.
SAG Foundation Conversations.
Right.
I wanted to start by saying that you are a woman who wears very many hats. You are an actor, obviously,
Right.
a director, a producer, a teacher, a political activist, a feminist, and an author of a best-selling memoir, Ask Me Again Tomorrow, A Life in Progress.
Oh, that is true.
Your life is full. You have received an Academy Award, a New York Film Critics Award, an LA Film Critics Award, and a Golden Globe for Moonstruck. In the theater, you received an Obie Award for Bertolt Brecht's A Man's Man, an Obie Award for Christopher Durang's The Marriage of Bet and Boo, and you are a founding member of the Whole Theater in Montclair, New Jersey, the Actors Company in Boston, and the Charles Playhouse in Boston.
Those are one and the same, actually.
Oh, they are? Oh, you're kidding.
When we moved, we just changed our name.
Oh.
That's it, to Charles Playhouse.
And it's now very famous, right? Are you still?
No, it's actually a kind of a shabby place at this
you're
point.
joking.
Yeah. And it's like,
I saw photos. I thought it looked quite impressive.
you went there? You've gone
No,
to
I Googled it.
Oh.
You're also, in 1992, you were a recipient of the New Jersey Governor's Walt Whitman Creative Arts Award.
Yeah, that was a nice one.
Yeah. Other notable films besides Moonstruck are Mr. Holland's Opus with Richard Dreyfuss, Woody Allen's Mighty Aphrodite, the Look Who's Talking series with Kirstie Alley and John Travolta, Herb Ross's Steel Magnolias, and I could go on and on and on.
Well, I think the one that means the most to me, actually, the one I enjoyed the most is Tales of the City.
Right.
Right, that was, I don't know how many of you know
I'm getting
that.
to television. I'm not there yet.
That's,
I have to mention The Simpsons because my 10-year-old son loves The Simpsons.
Oh, right.
And I was trying to get him to come with us. She was on The Simpsons. Yes, you did. Also, the HBO TV movie The Last of the Blonde Bombshells. I can't talk because I'm all nervous. With Judi Dench.
You want me to read it? I can read it.
Maybe. And Tales of the City, the miniseries for PBS. And, of course, the spin-offs, More Tales of the City and Further Tales of the City.
Right. Yeah, those are the best.
Yeah, they are. They are your best experiences.
Well, I liked the character was so wonderful.
Right. I'm going to get to that more later, okay?
Okay.
Because I want to start by talking about your movie that has just been released, Away from Her.
Right.
With Julie Christie, Gordon Pinsent, Michael Murphy, and directed by actress Sarah Polley. Now, this is a small, independent Canadian film with these wonderful actors.
Right.
This is directed by Sarah Polley, like I mentioned, who is, well, tell us a little bit about the film first.
Well, first of all, Sarah is, I think, 28 years old right now. And she adapted this as from a short story by Alice Munro, who is a Canadian and an internationally known writer of short stories. And this short story actually appeared, I think, in the New Yorker as well as in her collections. And it was called The Bear Came Over the Mountain, which is a really, I think, very interesting title once you get to see the movie and think about it. And I had done a movie by with another Canadian director, Thom Fitzgerald. I was actually an American who kind of despaired of living here and went to Canada. At any rate, he's up in Nova Scotia now, and he did a film called The Event, which was about assisted suicide, and Sarah played my daughter in it, one of my daughters in it. And that's when I got to meet her. And one of the things we did all the time was just laugh a lot. We just laughed a lot together. And she told me she wanted to direct, and she sent me some short films. She did a very interesting thing. I don't know what age it was, 22, 23. She'd been acting since she was like 6 or something like that. She stopped acting and went to film school for a couple of years. And out of that came these shorts, and out of that, of course, was the desire to do feature-length films.
Right.
So she called me up, and she had said during the event, she says, I'm going to do a movie. I want to call you up. I want you to be in. And I thought, okay, we'll see. You know, sure, all right, whatever. And indeed, she calls me up. I said, well, send the script. She sends the script. I'm out to page 10, and I think, my God, this is really good. Who wrote this? I go back. Adapted by Sarah Polley. I thought, ooh, this is something. I didn't know she could do that. And so that's how it began, and went up and I shot it, and it was really a low budget, was really, but there weren't that many, and the locations were all really, of course she knew the country very well, and they knew exactly where to go. And her husband is the editor, and he was on the set all the time. And I began to understand that he was a real, I mean, he has a real aesthetic, this man, and which they share. But I think he was invaluable to her during this process.
A real teamwork sort of
really,
project.
Really. Although
Right.
she said it was a bit much being in the editing room with him so much. She found it a little too much.
Yeah, I saw some interview. I told you earlier.
Did she say that?
She
Did
said
she say
they
that?
called it divorce editing or something like that. But they got through it apparently.
Yeah, right.
But what's astonishing also is this young woman is directing this movie, which is a movie about, well, it's sort of a love story, but it's about...
No, it is a love story.
It's a love story.
It's not
You're
sort
right.
of.
You're right. It is.
It really is a love
Go
story.
ahead and describe
Well, it is a
the
love
story.
story. People, Julie Christie has Alzheimer's and knows it and wants to go into a facility sooner rather than later. She wants it her choice. She wants it her decision. The first night she's there, she insists that she and her husband make love in that bed. And then he has to go away for a month while she makes an adjustment, supposedly. And then when he comes back, she doesn't know him at all. So then she meets somebody there that she had known when she was a teenager. And although her short-term memory is totally shot, her long-term memory is there. And they actually fall in love and are very romantic and physical with each other. And he sees this. And then this man turns out to be my husband, who I put there for 2 weeks while I go away on a vacation. Then I take him out, and then of course she is absolutely full on and brokenhearted. And then the story is how he tries to give his wife what he feels will make her happy, and it's to get this man back into that hospital. And to what ends he's willing to go.
He wants to see her happy again, because she's fallen into this depths, like you said.
Tries to seduce me initially. It's an interesting thing that happens. And
well, tell us about your character in the movie and what she goes through as well. Because she's in a real transitional period as well, because her husband, she knows also about this love affair.
Right.
And she deals with it in a different way than the Gordon Pinsent character, Grant.
Well, her husband, there seems to have been, I don't know when it started in their lives, there's not that much backstory, but certainly there's some terrible irregularity that happened to him. He was a kind of a CEO for some company, and some terrible indiscretions and, I don't know, illegality occurred, and they got rid of him and without his balloon retirement kind of thing. And so all she really has is this house and this guy who seems to have had some kind of collapse. It's not really clear whether he has dementia. It's a combination of dementia, small strokes, whatever it is, and you don't really get clear. But he's silent. He won't speak. Yeah, I think he has aphasia or something. And but she won't put him back. She won't put him there because she'd have to sell the house to put him there, and that's all she's got.
Right.
So that's why the Gordon Pinsent character.
Do you think the Gordon Pinsent character brings Marion out of herself in a way? I think, you know, when I was watching it, Marion has sort of decided, has has come to peace, sort of, with the situation,
No,
or has made
she's
a
not at
decision about what she's going to do.
She's not at peace at all. That's part of the problem at the beginning.
Right.
She's not at peace.
Right.
There are a lot of kind of things at bay in her. And so this situation, it's interesting. At first she resists it, and then when they go dancing, etc., she makes I think for me one of the best scenes she has in the movie, when she says to him, "I know what you're doing.
Right.
Couldn't you do it better? Couldn't you hide your real intentions better?" She says, "I'm trying to make," and this is the line that always got me, "trying to make a decision to be happy."
Right.
You know, and
Right. And
that
that's
to me
kind of
is-
sums up your character,
Yeah.
doesn't it? You're going through that journey.
well, that for her it's a decision. Most people are kind of spontaneously happy, but for her, she recognizes that this is a decision, and I actually think that it's probably true for a lot of us. I can identify with that line, that I frequently, I mean, I can either make a decision to be happy or to choose to look at, the husband is always saying that the cup is half emptied for me as opposed to half
Right,
full,
right,
you
right.
know what I mean? So that kind of thing of how you look at something.
Can you relate to this story on an Alzheimer's level? I mean, how so?
Well, my mother had Alzheimer's, and so and it was a 5-year period. And it's for those of you who know Alzheimer's intimately like that, you know what a terrible roller coaster it is, and how painful it is for everyone in a family to deal with it. I have 3 children, and for each one of them, it was a very specific drama, as it was for my husband, and as it was for my brother and his wife. I mean, we were all terribly taken and pulled into the whole thing.
There's a scene, well, not a scene, but part of Julie Christie's sort of deterioration is, and I was talking to the Lionsgate fellow, you said it's sort of open-ended. You're not sure if this is her reaction to her husband. She goes back to the past. She stirs up the past that was very hurtful to her. And she kind of focuses on the negative. And it's not clear if it's because of Alzheimer's or if that's just where she's going at this point in her life. But she goes sort of in and out of reality as well. I mean, at the very, well, I guess I shouldn't say what happened at the very end of the movie, but I mean, that was sort of interesting to me, that what I read about your mother and her
She came
Alzheimer's.
out, yeah, there were little windows.
Right, exactly.
Little windows. After 2 years of not knowing me, I went one night to visit her, urged on by a friend who said to me, you know, there are things you haven't said to your mother, you must say them to her. And I said, I think it's a little late now. My mother doesn't know who I am. Right. Come on, let's go, she said. I thought. So she insisted. So it was 8 o'clock. I went. My mother, by that time, you could barely see under the sheet. She was so slim and small. I think she weighed about 80 pounds. And she was never tall. She was always about 5 feet. She always said she was 5'1", but she never was. She was 5'1". And so I went over to her, and I shook her up. I woke her up, and I said, Mother, Mother, it's Olympia. And she said, Oh, Olympia, I've been looking all over for you.
Oh.
I was like, of course, I immediately started to cry.
Yeah.
I couldn't even believe it. It was this little window and it's the same thing happens in the movie when you make a connection like that.
And it's so important, I suppose, that.
Well, it was important for me because I said things to her that I had never said. I did it. And her reply was astonishing to me. Well, I've put it in a book. I don't know why I shouldn't share it with you now. And it's not like it's a big secret. I said to her how frightened I'd been of her. She was very volatile and very physical and very tough and very critical and a lot of things, but mostly the physical thing was really, you know, when she would want me to cry and I wouldn't cry, and there was this battle of will going on all the time. And she was out of control angry at me. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, I'd been frightened of her and I was crying. And I said the whole thing, and she said to me, well, it was a very difficult birth. What I knew and kind of put together in that moment was that I had been it was a breech birth, but a terrible one. Mm-hmm. She had been ripped and torn, and they didn't do the plastic surgery, et cetera, that they do today.
Or the cesareans probably as often either.
So probably, and they told her she couldn't have another child. She would put her life in risk, but she had another child, and she told me at a separate time she didn't want me to be alone in the world. And it's like, and so what was in her, she actually helped me understand, was a lot of anger, mm-hmm. which she didn't feel entitled to. Mm-hmm. That a mother's not supposed to feel that, but it would come out. Mm-hmm. And it was a revelation, and that much abused word, a gift, because I was able to finally understand what had happened, what had started all this stuff mm-hmm. between us. And then, of course, I was very willful, and her job as a Greek mother was to make sure that I did not dishonor their family. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't see that with that kind of willfulness and independence that I wasn't going to do that. So we were...
Butt heads.
Yeah.
I want to just ask you a little bit about working with Sarah Polley. I mean, did you find her at all intimidated with working with these amazing actors?
A little bit. She was at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
She kind of, well, you know, I think maybe if we put the cup here and blah, blah, blah. She stopped that pretty soon. Okay. She herself has been through a great deal. I think she had tuberculosis of the spine, if I'm not mistaken. And she spent, I don't know, a year in bed, and she's got like a steel rod in her
spine.
She
was like 4 years in a brace. And then at like 14, she had this operation.
And then this rod, I don't exactly quite understand it, but that rod is there physically and metaphorically, let me tell you.
Yeah, and she said, well, I just have a quote from her. She said, it was interesting to make a film about what love looked like after life had gotten in the way and what remains. And I think she was also, I saw an interview with her, she was talking about, what sparked her interest is the fact that she was newly married.
Yeah.
You know, and she wanted to sort of explore what it might be like 50 years down the road. So I thought that was very interesting. Do you think she accomplished that?
I think she accomplished a version of it,
right?
Probably through rose-colored glasses. That's my. I mean, I've been married 44 years.
Yes.
So.
Yes, I know.
I have I don't know.
And I want to ask you about that as well. Now,
but thanks for your vote of confidence.
Well, this movie you must go see it. It's open to rave reviews. It'll open wide on Friday, I believe, tomorrow?
10, I think it goes to
10 theaters and then wide later on.
Then wide, yeah.
But yeah, I just saw it today and enjoyed it thoroughly and touched me deeply. Now, I want to talk a little bit about you, specifically, like your whole life.
Oh, okay.
You were born... You were born
A lot of it is pretty boring, I'll tell you that one right now.
I don't think so. You were born in Lowell, Massachusetts, to Greek immigrant parents, and your brother's named Apollo. Now, when I read that your brother was named Apollo and you were Olympia, and the Greek god Apollo was born in Olympia.
Mount Olympus, they all lived there, yeah.
Right? I was wondering, well, I guess I can't really say what the connection was because it's sort of obvious, but I mean, it's interesting to me because at that time when your parents immigrated to the States, which was early in the 20th century, when they had children, they tended to give them Western sort of names so that they would integrate into the culture, you know, and not kind of, you know, put their children through more grief than they absolutely had to, you know.
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Right.
In some ways, they really wanted to assimilate, but there were some ways in which they wanted to hold on.
Right.
Which is true
is
for
so
all. You
fantastic.
can see that in all more recent immigrant
Yes,
groups.
yes, for sure you
spot
can,
it.
yeah.
So it was a contradiction. They carried a contradiction. On the one hand, there were things about being in America that they grabbed hold of very quickly. But also, you see, they came into Lowell where the mills were in Lowell, and the Greeks, being the new immigrants in town, were subject to a lot of harassment. The women, when they went, the men had to surround them because the Irish and the Germans and the French would not only humiliate them, they would throw dirty water bags at them, they would throw stones at them. But this happened to every immigrant group that hit the shores at that time.
Right.
This went on. So, and what the grown-ups did in the mills, we did in the streets. So there was a lot of fighting, and it was all about names, and it was about, standing up for your name. It's a big thing about the name. And so then when I got to New York and they said, well, you should change your name, it was like, no.
I was going to ask you, did you ever think about changing
I
your
did,
name?
and I realize now I should have, if I were really career-minded. But I couldn't. It was just too many fights on the street, too many.
And how did that
Too
affect
much.
you?
We would put stones in snow and throw them. By the time I was
nasty.
11, 12, I had a knife. Did I use it? No. Did I brandish it? Yes. I had to.
How did your childhood affect, okay, so how did that,
I'll tell you how. I walk into the room and I can spot the enemy in 10 minutes. My husband walks into the room and he can tell you what wonderful people are there.
Oh, right.
But I know that one, over that one, I have to watch that.
Do you still carry the knife?
Oh, yeah. Well, I watch.
So what drew you to acting?
What drew me, I have no idea.
No?
None whatsoever. If I sit back and try to think about it, I suppose both my parents did a lot of amateur stuff for the Greek War Relief, for the American Red Cross during the Second World War. My father played Oedipus Rex in a classical Greek as part of the Demosthenes Club in Lowell. He did Madame X as a benefit during the Second World War. I played the Spirit of Young Greece. I don't know when I was 10 or something, in something that they had. And
You had a real solid Greek community, it sounds like, in Lowell.
There was in Lowell, but what happened is that the Greeks began to become a political bloc, and the way they controlled it was they moved in and they decided to redevelop the area, and they raised all the buildings that the Greeks were in. And my father was a young lawyer at the time, and they tried to stop it, but they couldn't. They were afraid the Greeks were going to be, and they did become a political. Eventually a Greek was governor in Massachusetts, so that kind of thing did happen. But
right.
It's a very interesting thing. You take a look at these immigrants and what happened. We think now how terrible it is, what's happening with the Mexicans. Blood was on the street.
Right.
Terrible, terrible things were going on, as they are now. So it's
Well, you
still we do it better than other countries. This bringing together, I think, of various immigrants. I think we do it better than most countries. Even with all the violence and with everything else, we at least are set up structurally to say we want it to work.
right.
Whether we can get it to work is something else, but we're structurally set up. We all agree that it's what we want to have happen here.
Right.
Which is not happening other places. I keep thinking about that.
Right.
The price people paid just to have that in this country. So intolerant of differences, whether they be ethnic or religious or sexual or regional or.
Right. That's true. So, well, you moved on to, was it Boston University where you got a degree in physical therapy?
Yeah.
And you became a physical therapist at first.
Right.
Before
Well,
you
when I was in college, I was selected along with this other woman to write and direct a review of sorts. Why they selected me, I don't know. I loved sports. That's what I did in high school, and I had so much pleasure in doing it. I thought, this is what I really want to do.
What kind of sports did you do?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, I did everything. I was New England fencing champ for 3 years. I was on the New England riflery team. I was captain of the tennis team. I played basketball. I did track and field. I was a ping pong champ at the high school. I mean, it was like, I just loved it. It was a number of things. It was the way I showed and proved that I was not as good as, but better than all these other
Were you very competitive?
groups. Yeah, very, very competitive. I wanted to win, prove I was better, all this stuff. And it was a sexual outlet, I think, also as well for me, so.
It was. How?
Yeah.
You met boys,
You could
or
get
it was
really
just getting
very aggressive. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the New York women's team play? Yeah. I don't know. How many of you have seen that team? You know,
Which team?
The women, the Patriots, right?
Oh, right.
I mean, the first time I saw them, I went to see them. They came out on the court, and I just started to cry. Even now, thinking about it, because they were able to dribble the length of the court. We could take 3 steps. That was it. And it was over. They blew the whistle on you. And thinking about it back, I thought, what did they think? We would lose our virginity if we went a little bit further? It was amazing to me, the rules that they had for women's sports. You know, and there were these women, like, their bodies were like moving, and they were aggressive, and they weren't hiding how aggressive and competitive they were.
No,
It was
they
like,
don't.
It
No,
was
they don't.
fabulous. It was just great.
That is one thing with women's sports these days is
It's
I
just
think
great.
it's opened up and they are allowed to be aggressive and you
not
know,
ashamed to
physical
show
and
it.
not ashamed to show it.
That was the thing.
Right.
I thought was so great.
So then, but you were a physical therapist for a long
yeah,
time,
yeah.
and you
Well, I realized that I didn't want to continue.
right.
So I thought, well, how am I? There was no money to start again, and so it was my mother, always with the reality check, that if I wanted it, I'd had to go and make it happen myself. So
If you wanted to do what?
if I wanted to go back to school, that they
Drama?
could not start, yeah, with drama. So I looked around, and I could get a scholarship from the National Foundation from Infantile Paralysis, and so I did that, and I went out and I did 4 polio epidemics just at the very end there, and I saved my money and went back to graduate school.
So that, which is also very interesting for that time. How old were you at that time? In your 30s, was it?
Oh no,
you weren't that old.
I was like when I went back to
When you went back to graduate school, because that's
let's see,
very brave
21,
and aggressive.
22, 23, 20, about 25. Because I first went back to Columbia. I went to Columbia, and then it looked like I was going to get married.
Right.
And then that didn't happen, and it fell apart when I was doing one of the epidemics down in Texas. And then I didn't know what to do, so I stayed and went to SMU in the graduate school in comparative lit. I thought I'd be a writer. I dropped all that acting, directing, and I thought I'd be a writer. And I got a lot of support for it. And then my father almost died, and I had to come back. And then there was another. Then I thought I was on Martha's Vineyard. I thought I would go and I would write there, but I wasn't writing at all. I was just fooling around a lot. And then there was all this stuff. Oh, we need therapists, and terrible. The worst epidemic was in Boston. And so I decided, well, I should go do that. And then by the end of that, I decided I'm going back to school. I'm going to I don't want to write, you know. And then I applied to go back to the graduate school. So a little time, I think I graduated from graduate school when I was about 27. Because all of this semester at Columbia, year at SMU.
Right. And then was it soon after that you went to New York?
No. A group of us started a theater. We
Which one? The actors?
well, we did one season of stock at Rangeley, Maine, in which one night we had 12 people and 6 left at intermission. It was quite a place. We put $300 down, each of us, for room and board, and then this guy, producer, was supposed to pay us. We were there a week, and he called us and said, come home. He had invested all our money in a show in Boston, and it failed. And it was my first understanding of why you had to get into a union. You needed a union, because the Barracudas were out. And but then we decided to stay, and we ate tuna fish casseroles and peanut butter jelly sandwiches all summer. But that was my first season. And then the following year, after my second year of graduate school, we did a season at Buzzards Bay, and then we decided to stay together, and we went to Boston and found a loft and fixed up a theater, and we called ourselves the Actors Company. And then we moved the following year. We were on Charles Street at Beacon Hill, and when we moved, so that people would know who we were, we took the name the Charles Street Playhouse. That's what I meant. It's the same place.
Right.
We just moved, and then these people that wanted to supposedly help us, and we were going to keep an ensemble, that wasn't their intention, and slowly people started to leave, and I was the last one that left. And I was very angry, and one night I stole a lot of period clothes. And I raced out of the building, and they spotted me. And one of the guys was with the mafia, because the new building was owned by the mafia. Don't even ask. I mean, therein lies a big tale, but never mind. So I get outside with these costumes, because I didn't know what to do. I was so angry. They had screwed us, the money they promised us. The parts, over and over and over. So I get home and I call up my cousin, Michael Dukakis, he was a senator at the time. Yes. And I said, Michael, this is what I've done. And I said, I just left the costumes, and one guy's mafia, the other's a lawyer, you know. And I said, what do you think I should do? And there was a pause. He said, time to go to New York, Olympia.
Pack up your period costumes and go to New York.
So I did. I sold the period costumes, and I sent everybody a little money because they'd all been screwed so badly, and then I went to New York.
Yeah. So,
with that good feeling, I came to New York.
What was that like then, going to New York? I mean,
I came to New York with $57 in my pocket. That summer before I came, I worked in the what the hell is the name? I can't remember it. Candy Cupboard Chocolate Factory. Ooh. Much like the stuff that was in, you know, that thing that they did in the television series.
I Love Lucy.
I Love Lucy.
Yes.
That actually happened to me. I mean, I was like, the chocolates got ahead of me, and so I would run down and push the boxes, and then the guy who's running it, no, stop pushing boxes! He screamed. No, you had to like keep the pace, and I didn't know what to do. You know what I did? I fainted. I pretended to faint on the boxes, and the guy is screaming, "Get her off the boxes! Get her!" I mean, he didn't give a shit about me or anything. There was no union. And all of these women that worked there in this cold, because the chocolates have to be cold, you know. So by the time I was there a month, I decided that I wasn't going to be an actress. I was going to be a union organizer. I was so angry at the way these women were treated. And they were like a city block you had to go, and then downstairs to the bathroom, and you only had 10 minutes. And these women, 50, 60-year-old women, running so they could go to the bathroom. And it was like, oh, the rage in me just didn't stop. You know,
that was New York, right?
That was still Boston.
Oh.
So finally, I managed to put together $57.
Yeah.
And so I came to New York and stayed with a friend of mine. She had an apartment, and she let me sleep on her couch. And
you started auditioning and things like that.
I had one pair of heels and I think it was about 3 months. They were like, it was like really, I remember thinking, well, this will work. They're okay. This is another style. I just have to set my head to the idea that it's another style. You know?
Literally pounding the pavement.
Yeah, like, well, yeah.
So, when did you meet your husband? How did that happen?
Oh, that was a while after that. I got my first job in a play called The Breaking Wall with Joanna Merlin. I don't know if many of you know her. I think she still does a lot of casting, and she teaches a Michael Chekhov techniques. She was in that with Alan and Sarah, who was also part of the acting class that I was taking with Peter Cass, who was the teacher that has meant the most to me. He was at Boston University when I was there, and then he taught in New York. Alan was in the show, and he called me up New Year's Eve and said, oh, you want to come over? They've hired this woman, and it's a little Italian part, which was nice. But I went over and got the part, and then proceeded to realize that working in New York was not going to be at all like working with an actors company at the Charles Playhouse. It was not. It was like really pretty deadly. There was no real effort on everybody's part to be helpful to each other. There certainly was no, we weren't homogenous in the way in which we looked and thought about acting, and certainly not in the process that we all shared. And the director was slightly demented. I mean, I never, it took me a while to actually believe that, but I finally understood that I was to pay no attention to him, and that I really just had to figure it out. But I couldn't appear that I wasn't paying no attention. And so the dance began. How do you survive them? It was like that kind of thing.
Was your husband in that play?
No. No, Alan was in that play,
Okay.
and, wonderful, wonderful man, who, with his wife, produced the first off-Broadway show I played a lead in, which was called The Opening. Guardino, Jerry Guardino, none of you will know him. And his wife, Fran Malice, a Canadian, another Canadian, directed it. And she was great, and it went well, and it was well received, and I was well received. It was a time when that kind of a play couldn't make it. That kind of a play would never make it today. It was about immigrants trying to survive on the Lower East Side, et cetera, except these were Italians, and people were interested in those stories at that time. Today, if those stories make it at all, they make it on TV. And even then, it's like people have seen that story over and over again.
Right.
Now they function and work with, say, George Lopez. I don't know how many of you, know, or the girl that's the fat. What's the name of that one?
Right.
What?
Oh, Ugly Betty.
Yeah, Ugly Betty.
Right.
They function like that.
Right.
They're a little different. They have more edge. It's a little, It's,
Right. It's more of also the comedy
Yeah.
element. And so how did you meet your husband? I'm determined to find
Well,
out.
he came to read for this play, The Opening of a Window.
Okay.
And prior to that, I'd gotten a job working with the Phoenix Theater, which was down on 2nd Street and about 12th Street. There's a big Cineplex there right now, 2nd Avenue and 12th Street. And I had gotten, I was working in the subscription department, and then Ed Heffernan, who I went to school with, started the Actors Company. He was in the company at the Phoenix, and they started a touring company, and he suggested me, and Nick Kepros, who, a wonderful, wonderful actor, who later I did Titus Andronicus with in the park. He was the director. He hired me, and that was my equity card.
Right.
That was major. And we traveled, we did the Chekhov, the Boar, Shaw's Caesar and Cleopatra, and Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. These are the 3 plays that we did. And I was very grateful to have that job, and it was just really wonderful. And so, and I don't know who saw me or didn't see me, but I was, Jerry knew me from that play, and he wanted me to come in and understudy, and he said they paid me to come in and audition people, to just be, and I set my mind to getting that part. I thought, I can
Right.
show them I can do it better than whoever they had. And Louis came in then and read, and he was in a show at the time playing Achilles in a comedy. Can't remember the name of it. And he was really just wonderful. There's a great spirit and humor and a wonderful, wonderful looking man. And they didn't hire him because the husband was supposed to die at the end of the first act from tuberculosis, and he didn't look like he was going to die. And then I saw him in the village walking around with people. I thought, I kept my. And then when we were doing Henri's Medea, and the guy playing it decided he had it with New York, wanted to go to L.A., the director said, "Do you have anybody to suggest?" I said, "Yeah, what about Louis Zorich?" So that's how I kind of.
So that's how you got to know him.
Yeah.
Did you have a long courtship? Did you marry?
6 months we were married. Yeah.
And so how long have you been married now?
44.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's unusual for actors. I read a story about, you were talking about how competitive you were and you wanted to be the best actress.
Still am.
Better. Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it doesn't go away like that.
Better than anyone that I read.
But I have more control over it now. It doesn't run me around, I don't. As
is
much
that right?
as it did. Yeah, that's a difference.
There was the play you did, Long Day's Journey into Night, which your brother directed, right?
Yeah, one of the times I did it, he directed it.
But wasn't it with your husband as well?
Yes.
And there was that. Do you know the story I'm
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about?
yeah.
Go ahead. It's about the sort of the competitive nature, trying to
Well,
tame it a
actually,
little
the
bit.
first time I was offered the part, I said I couldn't do. I said no. I said I can't play this part. Jane Cronin, who was also part of this initial company in Boston, I said she should do it. She's Irish. She had this great head of red hair. She's very proud of her hair, and she talks about it. I said, and she should do it. She's wonderful. Blah blah blah. And the director said, well, I would really like you. And I was at the time seeing a therapist, and he said, well, tell me about this character. And I told him about the drugs, and I'd had a 2-year episode with drugs. And he said, why are you giving this part away? It seems to me you know about this. He said, why don't you want to do something you know about? It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh, I can't possibly. I didn't realize that the reason I didn't want to get to it.
It was too close.
Well, yeah, and I was afraid. And indeed, after the second night, on the way to the theater, I had an anxiety attack.
Is that right?
Yeah, I felt like, well, I did it once. I proved I could do it. Why do I have to do it again? I said, was that kind of thing. But the one you're talking about, the story. So it's interesting that play, when you do plays over and over again, they come at certain parts of your life, and then your life informs what you see in the play and how you move through it. It's so you can track yourself, like I did Mother Courage 4 times and the Cherry Orchard 5 times, and it goes on and on. Because I like to repeat things because it does change through the years. But in this instance, what happened was that Louis was not looking at me in the first scene, and I said to him, well, Louis, I said, I can't see your eyes. You're always, every time I look at you, you're turning away. And he didn't say anything, and I said, so, I don't know how to handle this. I turned to my brother, who's director, and he says, well, I don't know what to tell you any more than I know what to do when you try to run the stage. So we started to have a fight, and my husband is just sitting there letting these two Greeks scream their heads off at each other. And finally, my brother said something to me that was really, I thought, important. He said, the truth is that you only really play with somebody when you think that what they're doing is right. If they're not doing what you think they should be doing, you look like you're playing with them, but behind your eyes, you're not. He could see that. I mean,
Right.
because he knows me so well, and it really stunned me, and it really changed my acting. And you want to know something? He doesn't remember saying it. It is the most amazing thing. Something like that was so incredible for me was for him just part of, what was going on.
Right. Yeah, I had a little quote of exactly that. When you're trying to be better than everyone else, you aren't playing with them.
You aren't
It's
playing with
empty.
somebody. It says you won't do it unless they're playing by your rules, instead of
Right.
accepting what they're doing as though, well, that's the character. You do that, and
Right.
then Austin Pendleton, who I've worked with a lot. We've acted together, directed each other. We were in a play together, and I was complaining about some actor, and he turned to me and he said, "You don't really want to tell another actor what to do you?" I thought, yeah, I do want to tell this actor what to do. But I understood what he was saying. See, I wanted to win, and if that actor wasn't going to help me win, I wasn't going to play with them, or I was going to try to change it. So that's what I mean by that competitive thing is, does it run you, or do you get some control over it?
And do you feel like you have
Yeah, I do.
control over it?
First of all, I recognize it much faster when it's beginning to operate and I can do something, yeah.
Because I read that when you sort of had that realization, everything sort of seemed to be set in motion for Moonstruck. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it was like, as a result of this revelation, you sort of became, you stopped trying to prove things to people. And then there was this string of events that led
No, I
to
stopped trying to control people.
Right.
Control, and you know, the interesting thing is that it's not only, the next step is, after that, is not controlling the audience. That's the big one. Because we take so much pride in, people say, well, they held the audience in the palm of their hands. She got them to laugh here. You know, I mean, they cried, they were silenced. I mean, all these things that actors live off of, you know. And so if you stop trying to do that, if you just say, look, an audience can have whatever experience it wants. I'm going for this. You know, and they laugh when they want. They do whatever they want. And I am up here doing what I think I need to do. And that was the big thing for me, was to let go of that. And that we were doing an evening of Jacques Brel, and I was singing a song. I don't know how many of you know the Bilbao song, that old Bilbao moon, da 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 da. It's a song about what it was like when they were younger, and they were in this bar, and all this was happening, and it was directly to the audience. And this is what the audience was doing. They were like this recognition. They were like nodding and whatever. And something happened when I saw that. I thought, I mean, they know everything. What am I trying to do here? I mean, inform them, enlighten them. That's crazy. That's not what this is about. Because they know everything. If they didn't know everything, how could you do it? I mean, what I began to understand was that we actors of a night with each other bring to the fore or articulate an aspect of our humanity that's in the play, contradictions about it, challenges about it. It's whatever you want. You can make your laundry list. And the audience is reminded, it's evoked in the audience. It's called an aesthetic, but that's because what that word really means is awakening. So that particular aesthetic of performing is about awakening. You know. Now, this sounds all very nice saying it here, but I mean, I learned this like spoonful by spoonful. I mean, one little drop would drop in, you know. And then I would talk about it to the people that meant a great deal to me, because you usually feel silly and stupid talking this way about acting to most people. So it has to be people that you really, who know your work, who understand where you're at, who care that you continue to somehow evolve, and
Right, that understand that the whole process is an evolution.
that it is a process.
And that it is a process.
Yeah.
And it's a process that I think as actors we're always grasping for, trying to, and never quite reaching.
Well, the fortunate thing about it is that we're constantly evolving as people. So acting then becomes a way, a path for this to happen,
Right.
you know.
Right. So after 30-odd years of being basically in the theater, right, you won the role in Moonstruck and ended up with an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. And so this, all of a sudden, you were in your 50s or so and you were a star. Is that right?
Well,
What was
I
that
don't know
like?
that I would call myself a star, but I certainly was known. You know, I was like, people began to know me and my work.
What was that like?
Well, that was, some parts of it were great. The idea that I was now getting scripts. I wasn't auditioning. They would just call me up and sing, is she free, blah, 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 this kind of that.
Right, right.
That I was getting good money. Our daughter was going to college on credit cards at the time. So this was really important that this happened. I mean, we were really seriously in a lot of financial trouble because my husband had had a terrible automobile accident and hadn't been able to work for 5 years. They said he would never walk. I mean, the recovery was difficult and painful for him, for all of us. So with this, it happened about 10 years ago, 10 years earlier. So this really changed the economics of our family, also the scrounging and the worrying, and because we had 3 children, and all of that kind of got lifted, and you can imagine for yourselves what a tremendous relief that was.
Yes.
Tremendous.
And you know, and also the fact that it was later in your life. I mean,
Yeah.
you see over and over again young actors becoming mega millionaires and superstars and all that other stuff. But it
You know
gives
what?
us faith.
You know what, they asked my mother, did you think your daughter would ever grow up to be a celebrity? She says, no, I never thought she was pretty enough. She actually said, because in her day you had to be Theda Bara. You know what I mean? She meant I didn't have those looks that she associated
Right.
with the movies. You know,
Right,
it's like
right,
she
right.
said that, my brother and I couldn't stop laughing. It's like, true to the end, Alec, true to the end, here she goes.
What was it like working on Steel Magnolias with all those wonderful actresses? Shirley MacLaine.
It was really interesting, and sometimes a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
sometimes sad, and was sometimes
Because-
very interesting. I felt like I learned something from everybody. You know, in 2 weeks I'm going out to do a film with Shirley MacLaine.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, after all this time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you remain friends and stay in touch? Or?
Yes, we have, and I've gone to see her when she was still doing her act in Vegas, and
Right.
she came to see me in this one-woman show that I did, and so we've, you know,
Yeah, stayed in touch.
yeah.
I always thought that Moonstruck and Steel Magnolias are about very strong, independent women that, you know, that are, the perspective of these women is really, well, it's from a woman's perspective more than maybe from a man's. I mean, do you think that's true, and how important is it for you to find roles like that?
Well, I don't know. Of course, they were both written by men. Yeah, Moonstruck was John Patrick Shanley. You know, there's a line in that thing where it's just a scene with John Mahoney, for those of you that remember this movie. Oh, my God, they keep playing it over and over again. It's amazing. She says she won't go home with him that night because she says, I know who I am. That line, even today, I mean, I'm thinking about it was about a month ago, actually. A woman came up to me and said, I want to thank you for that. You know, I mean, I didn't write the line, obviously, but I mean, I knew what it was about. So that line seemed to have meant a great deal.
Really resonating with women.
I don't know that I would, you see, I never think in terms of, well, are these women strong or whatever. there's something in them that I respond to. That what I like is anything that has a journey, and if it doesn't have it really explicitly, I try to finagle it, and I try to negotiate it, so that. Like, well, it's obvious in this movie. Well, it's obvious away from her that it's like it's in the text.
Right.
You know, you don't have to do all that.
Right.
But and it's in Moonstruck. Still Magnolias is harder. You know, is a harder thing. But I mean, I played it. I wish that it had been more explicit. But.
You did a play called The Trojan Women.
Anna did Hecuba.
And you did Hecuba.
Which are the two plays that Euripides wrote about Hecuba.
I read that the Trojan Women, you somehow, as a result of doing that play, you sort of discovered a new spirituality.
Well, that word is a very, right? How many times you hear that word and you think, what are you talking about? People call that spirituality. I tend not to think about it or want to think about it that way. Hecuba has this thing where she's on the ground after she's tried all these measures to convince, when she has lost the bloodline is over, the grandson, they bring him, dead. And she's on the ground, banging the ground and yelling, "Do you see, do you hear?" So my brother and I had done our own translation, and we had been like 3 months at it, for heaven's sakes. And there we are, in rehearsal, and I said to him, "What am I doing here? Do you see?" He said, "Well, it's the ancestors. You're yelling to the." I said, "But what can they do?" I said, what is all this about?" And he said, "Well, it's ancestor worship." And I said, "But what am I playing? What do I think I can achieve by doing this? Why is this in the play?" I couldn't figure it out. So he said, so we had a little thing, and he suggested I go read The Golden Bough, which I'd already read. And so I was kind of like thinking, well, what am I going to do about this? And I went across the street to a bookstore called Yesterday's Bookstore. I was looking for opening night gifts that were really cheap, like books and stuff. And I found this book that I thought was going to be for the set designer, because it had wonderful plates about Greek, this, that, and the other thing. And I brought it home and I was going to wrap it, and then I started to read it. And it was called Perseus and the Gorgon. And I started to read it, and I got more and more interested in it, and these Asiatics came into Mesopotamia, and that they raised the temples, and people moved ahead of them to the east as they came from the west. I think, what is this woman talking about? She was an archaeologist, and she had found on Cyprus she believes that the head of the Gorgon that Perseus brought back to the mainland, the one that Athena has in her shield, was from the temple at Cyprus, and that Perseus came in, raised the temples. Of course, they murdered, tortured, raped all the priests and priestesses, and buried in oblivion and covered with silence the teachings of the Great Mother. And that phrase, buried in oblivion and covered with silence, I thought, what teachings? Who is this Great Mother? And why did they have to be buried in oblivion and covered with silence? It kind of grabbed my heart. I couldn't figure what the hell this was all about. And someplace I knew that it had something to do with the Trojan women. I understood that. Mm-hmm. So I started to look for books. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I would go to religion, history, archaeology. And then one day I was in a Buddhist bookstore. I just went in, and I was trying to look through the shelves, and I knocked one book off, and I picked it up and I looked at it and said, When God Was a Woman, I thought, by Merlin Stone. So I thought, well, the teachings of the great man, I thought, maybe, why don't I get this book? And it just blew my mind. I just couldn't believe it, what was in it. I would read it and I'd come running to my husband and say, listen to this. Listen to what happened 2,000 before Christ. Listen to what happened 1,500. Look what the Greeks did. Look what the Romans did. You know, look what the Jews did. The Muslims, the Christians, the Protestants. Look what they did to this thing between men and women. It was like I got bitten by something. And then it became a passion. Prehistory became a total passion.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Wow.
it became a total passion. I had to know more and more, you know. And my husband would say, well, what is this book? And I say, well, it's about that. He said, but didn't you read about that? I said, but you don't understand. Everybody's got a different view on this. And I was like, you know, I became tremendously involved in it. And once when I was with the whole theater in Montclair, New Jersey, and by the way, this was all by myself. I was like, I didn't tell anybody. I thought, well, I'm a little nuts. Nobody else is doing this. I didn't know that for some reason, it's like that story about the monkeys with the sweet potatoes. You know that monkey, the story about monkeys at the ocean washing, finding in the salt water, and then in the next 2 years, all the monkeys in like a 5,000-mile area are washing their sweet potatoes or something. How did that happen? Well, it seems that a lot of women were doing this, and a lot of groups were happening, and organizations were starting all over. This was the 80s. This had already started, though, like in the 50s. There were women out there when it wasn't safe to be out there with this stuff, believe me. But, you know, I got terribly involved with it, and slowly I began to, finally one day I had the courage to try to find Merlin Stone. And she happened to be sitting right here in New York. And I mean, that was like a revelation. And she took me to different events. Donna Reed, who did a dance thing about the daughter, the mother, the crone, which are the three demarcations of a woman's life. And then I was watching that. I was thinking, well, the problem with this is the conflict. The life is in the transitions, not when you arrive at it. So then I thought, I'm gonna try and put a piece together about how do you get from a girl when you're a virgin, what is this transition to being sexually active, the transition to being married, to having children, to having no more menstrual periods, to being what they call a crone, you know, a wise old woman. And one day when I was in the Rockefeller Dodge Foundation with this incredible man who kept giving us money every year at the theater, but I mean, I had to go in and bleed over the earth to get it. But at any rate, and as I walked out the door, he said to me, I was there for about an hour and a half, and he says, Olympia, he said, what are you reading these days? I thought, I'm not going to tell him what I'm reading. He'll think I'm crazy. And then I said, oh, well, and I thought, what the hell? He was the first one I told, except for my husband, of course. So I turned and I said, this is what I'm reading. And then I was there for another hour. And he said, you figure out a way to put that on a stage, I'll give you money. It was the first time somebody challenged me to do that. And so I did. I tried to put something together. And it was so it was a beginning of that.
Voices of the Earth?
Yeah, that, and out of that came Voices of the Earth. And the people, Leslie Avazian, how many know her? She's an actress and a writer. She wrote 9 Armenians, Lovely Life, A Lovely Day, a whole bunch of plays. Joan McIntosh, who was with the original Schechter. I mean, they were in it. Because everything we had to create from massive improvisation, so you needed actors with a certain kind of sensibility. To do it. And then out of that we decided to stay together, and this Voices of Earth started.
Do you find that this sort of discovery, I hate to say
Does this make any sense? I feel like, does it? Am I making sense? All right. Thank you for your reassurance. Because you feel a little nuts with this stuff. Go ahead.
No, it's fascinating because I wonder, does it affect your work?
Yes.
How so? I mean, how does it ground you? Does it ground you in your life, and in how?
No, it does. It's. I don't know. I mean, I don't much look to be grounded. I don't look for that. I feel like I like being disorientated, and I mean, I think more stuff comes from that than from being grounded and on top of it and of this and of that and the other thing. It has affected my work. First of all, the way I see things and the way I understand things. It has affected me deeply in the way I do workshops. We're going to do a workshop in July, I think it's at INTAR. We're going to use theater exercises based on the Sumerian myth of the descent of Inanna. There are the story there about accessing deeper, darker aspects of self that have been buried in oblivion and covered with silence. And so that aspect of it happens. But I never understood what it is, oh God, to feel with other women, a sisterhood, or those words. And with all of this history, I feel that my judgments are, they're not relevant anymore to me. They don't matter to me. I can see women, and I can see how they handle being second-class citizens, how they handle silencing who they are, why they do that, how that happens to young girls, and why that happens to them. I see how men then have to assume certain positions and and points of view and stuff that deprive them of aspects of who they are in a way of living. I mean, it's like and the judgments are gone. I think that's probably the best way to say it.
You said once, I think we're socialized, I think we
Yeah.
women are socialized out of being women, and we have to find our way back.
Yeah.
What do you
And
mean
but I
exactly?
think this is also true of men.
I don't disagree with you.
I think that
because
it's also,
They
but
automatically fall into a
Yeah.
position when the women take
there's a
this
kind of a
position.
socialization that happens that has to do with controlling us. And it's about institutions maintaining power over people. And whether it's the church, whether it's the government, whether it's the military. I mean, there's a whole, the methodology of education got totally changed in the 19th century because of the Industrial Revolution. Because of what was needed for that, they changed how they taught people in schools. Because they had to do repetitive tasks. I mean, it's like an incredible thing if you start to read the history of it, et cetera, et cetera.
That starts way back in the burying of the
Right.
mother.
So this, partly, and for me, I watched my mother and what she did and how she behaved, and I thought, I don't want to be like that. I want to be like my father. My father was reasonable. He seemed rational. He left the house. He wasn't imploding and exploding with all this stuff.
Yeah.
On the other hand, he wasn't being humiliated every day the way my mother was. Not that my father wanted to humiliate my mother. That was the way, as a Greek male, he behaved. That's what he had been taught. That's what he had seen. I saw my mother take it. It wasn't until years later, after my father died, and one day I exploded with her. I said, because we never talked about it till then. And I said, why did you let him treat you that way?
Right.
Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you leave him? And I'm crying and carrying on. And she, bless her heart, she just looked at me and she said, all right now, darling, stop crying. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain anything. She just didn't want me to be so wrought over by the whole thing. She just blew me away.
She absorbed it all herself.
Yeah.
And it exploded out everywhere.
And it was like, but all when I was growing up, I mean, there were all this incredible behavior going on. And he would have, well, you know, your mother is, well, you see, the drill was that my mother was the nutty one.
Right.
Because she had feelings. Because she
had
didn't
drive.
and
She
she
had
didn't
desires.
have, well, she didn't have a right to defend herself and alter the behavior. That's what a Greek, you know, it's like any of you who come from strong ethnic backgrounds with these kinds of traditions know and understand what I'm talking about.
But I also think it's common. I mean, I can relate to that with my own mother,
Okay.
who was college educated, very,
Yep,
very
yep,
smart.
Yep.
She married my father. They moved to Edmonton, and she became a housewife. And she was incredibly frustrated. And she wasn't a great mother. She was a hard mother. This is being taped,
Right.
isn't it? Oh.
Right.
She wasn't warm and affectionate.
Right,
and
either was
bosom
mine.
Thing. She was cold and steely.
You
and
know,
she
but what they
wanted-
taught us,
Pardon me?
they taught us to be willful,
Yes.
to be tenacious. I mean, all of these
For
things.
sure.
Yeah, that's what my mother.
And she is angry to this day that she wasn't allowed. She felt that she wasn't allowed
Why?
to explore everything that she could
But she
explore.
didn't take it. But that's what you did. You took it.
Right.
Yeah,
I
that's
see.
the
It's
difference.
interesting. It's a lesson that you learn as a
Yeah.
daughter. You watch your mother particularly.
Well, I rejected my mother. I spent that whole first part of my life.
I rejected my mother in the whole first part of my life.
And then I spent the rest of my life trying to get back to her,
That's
trying to connect
exactly
with
the
women.
road I'm on now as well.
I understand,
am.
I understand.
And I empathize so with my mother, you know, because she was suppressed. She was a suppressed woman, and but she did create a willful daughter, and she
Yeah.
was willful in her own way as well. Yes, I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned earlier that one of your favorite projects was Tales of the City,
Right.
the mini-series. Tell us a little bit about that and your character, because
Yeah.
it's a
The woman, well, it was a woman who had been a man. She was
Oh,
a
okay.
transsexual. And I mean, everybody wanted this part, and I got it. I mean, it was like, I was like, and part of it was because Armistead's partner at the time woke up one morning and saw my face and said, Olympia Dukakis. And so, I don't know, the great mother was looking out for me. And it was just great.
Yeah, I read that he said it wasn't so much casting, but destiny.
Yeah, did he say that? That's
Yeah.
Armistead.
And the character is described as a dope-smoking, ambiguously gendered mother figure.
She's not ambiguous at all. She's a woman. She doesn't, she is absolutely,
But she used to be a man.
Yeah, she used to be, but she was a woman. Buried in that body, silenced, was a woman.
Right.
And I know that when I spoke to this therapist, who was a gender therapist, I said I read as much as I could because there wasn't a tremendous amount out about him. And I said, you have to find me somebody who knows about this. And so I had a meeting with this doctor, this woman, 6'3", walks in, talked like this, hello, Olympia, how are you? And she sat down, and I realized, of course, that she was a transsexual. And I said to her, I've read about it, and so I know how painful it is, physically, psychologically, socially, culture. I mean, it's a nightmare, or was a nightmare at that time for people to go through. And I said, what was it that you wanted so much that made you do this? And this is what this woman said to me. All my life, I yearned for the friendship of women. Well, it devastated me. I was like, you know, that's what it was. She wanted a connection with women. she felt that all the time, that she couldn't give voice to that. She couldn't, that there was a part of her there was a part of her that was not realized, had been silenced. And and at the end of the conversation, I realized that there was a part of me as a woman that had been silenced. This is before all of this other stuff I'm talking to you about. I understood that all women yearn to bring forward something of themselves as women that seems not available, accessible,
That we hold back.
not a right, they don't have a right to, it's not appropriate, blah, blah, blah. Find your own vocabulary for this. And so that's what I connected with, you know. It was just great. I always felt like when I grew up, I wanted to be like, the character's name was Anna Madrigal. I wanted to be the way she was. She seemed to have such a willingness to tolerate differences and contradictions, where I always tend to, well, is it this or is it this? And no, it's both. Okay. How do I?
There was, you did a one-woman show called Rose, and
Thank you. You saw that. Oh, great.
you know, Martin Sherman, who wrote it, he is best known for Bent. He said something similar about after he finished writing Rose, he immediately thought of you.
I know.
Again.
I thought that was
Now, what
destiny.
yeah, again.
Yeah.
You opened it in London, right?
6 months I was there.
Wow.
We
Now,
did it in
what
rep.
was that like? A one-woman monologue.
Yeah, that
right,
was
with no,
that was a terror.
break at all.
That was a terror.
Yeah.
The stress was so bad, I got a retinal aneurysm. Yeah, I didn't know that I got it from that.
Wow.
Yeah, it really was something.
Wow.
It was 74 pages we started off with, top to bottom, back to back.
And straight through, no break.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's what initially.
Right.
But then the director changed it, and we did an act break. And at first, I didn't think I could memorize it. I thought, nobody can do this. Who can do this? I can't do this. And I would jump up and say to my husband, that's it, I'm not doing this. And I'm calling my agent, and he would say, well, maybe you should sleep. And wait, see if you feel the same tomorrow. And
Right.
of course, and by tomorrow, I felt, oh, well, maybe I can do it.
Yeah.
Then just holding the whole woman's life.
But what a wonderful story. Can you tell us just a little bit about it?
Well, she's Rose herself, you mean?
Right. She just, it's
Well,
her telling her life story.
It was
basically.
commissioned by the National to commemorate the millennium. And they were doing this one, and they were doing Merchant of Venice. Because they wanted to tap into this experience of the Jews in the 20th century. They wanted to do that. So we ran in rep, the Merchant of Venice and Rose. And Rose is, people say that, well, she's a survivor, she's a this, she's a that. But I never thought of her that way. I always thought of her as somebody who did not want to. Surviving wasn't enough for Rose. She wanted to prevail every place that she wanted to. And so she starts in a shtetl in the Ukraine, moves to Warsaw, the war breaks out. She gets married, has a child. The child gets shot by a Ukrainian soldier she sees her just, you know. The husband, she doesn't know what happens to him. She survives in the sewers, which is an interesting, you know, what happened in the sewers is a whole other thing. And comes out, goes to, tries to get to Israel, is on the Exodus, meets an American sailor. They can't get into Israel because of the British mandate. They go back to Europe. He asks her to marry. She was like, by this time, numb. She says, if she married him, it was only her body that would go. Her body didn't bring love with it. She didn't have that. She goes to America. It goes on and on and on. And But what's moving, what's going on with this woman is that she's sitting Shiva and you don't know who she's sitting Shiva for. And this effort to look at her life and to see it and understand it and to deal with the contradictions is what pushes her through the whole thing. Because just before the play begins, she has found out that her grandson, living in Israel, has shot a 9-year-old Palestinian girl, which is how old her daughter was when her daughter was shot. And she cannot come to terms with that. And she has a big fight with her son. The only way she can do it is to sit Shiva for this Palestinian girl. And her son is outraged that she's doing this. What about all the Jews that have been killed in the argument? And this argument, she plays both sides in this argument. And, you know, and what's interesting is that the play ends not with a resolution, but with an acknowledgement that we're all living with these contradictions, which is exactly what we're doing. So last year I kind of made a little tour with it, and what is interesting to me is that the play is even more relevant today than it was when we did it in 2000 at the National. And then we brought it to New York and stuff like that. It's an extraordinary piece of writing.
So
Yeah, well, see, we're tired. My life goes on. It's exhausting.
But it wasn't boring.
I said that before I came. I'm going to talk about my life for an hour and a half. Oh, my God.
But now you seem to be as busy as you've ever been. Are you satisfied with the way your life has unfolded, and what what do you want to accomplish in the future?
Am I satisfied? Well, there are things that are not satisfactory, that's true. Others are. The thing, when I had this theater in New Jersey, a regional theater they called the Whole Theater, for 19 years, I did a lot of hustling. I raised a lot of money. We're always putting together seasons and this and that. And what happened was, before that, I couldn't hustle for myself. I learned to hustle, but now what it is, I mean, people say, "Oh, everybody complains there are no parts. You're always working." Well, it's not that I'm always acting; it's that I'm always hustling. And some days I wake up and I think, how long am I going to do this? How long am I going to just keep? It's like the idea that anybody's going to give you anything.
Right.
Forget it. You just got to keep this hustling going, creating projects for yourself, whether they be because you're excited about them or because you're terrified of them or whatever it is, and working with playwrights and film people, etc. I mean, it's like, that's what I do. I think the thing that I've learned is that you have to, as an actor, take total responsibility for everything. Everything, not only for your growth, your continued growth after you get out of school, but for your jobs. Don't wait for agents, don't wait for anyone. Just keep working, keep doing it. That's you. Don't wait for somebody to give you anything. Start a theater, start a reading group, start your own discipline. Just if you love acting and see it as your way of living or whatever, and you got to take the whole thing. You got to just, and not complain about it in the business this and the business that. It's that and a token will get you in the subway.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I was going to end with a quote of yours that you sort of touched on it before, but I'll
What
just
is-
say it again. I always look to move the character to places within herself where it becomes necessary to confront something, to learn something new. And you went on to say, most of us are not real eager to grow, myself included. We try to be happy, staying in the status quo. But if we're not willing to be honest with ourselves about what we feel, we don't evolve.
Yeah, that's, I suppose, true.
You said it.
And a lot of other things, but that's one of the things,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah.
The hustle keeps going. It doesn't change, it's just you hustle for yourself. And that's not an easy thing for many actors to do, I understand that. So trying to figure that one out's a big one.
Marcy asks, your theater project, Voices of Earth,
Right.
Is it still in existence? And if yes, where is it located? If not, why? And either way, what was the root need for it? But we sort of touched on that.
Right. And we're doing a workshop based on it. Leslie, Joan, and I are getting together in July at INTAR and doing a workshop. But you got to be 30 years and over. I mean, when we first started, I said, no, they have to be 50. I said, I don't want women coming in here worried about what a man's going to say. I said, no, no, no. But now I think things have changed. I think women, younger women, are more knowledgeable about the issues, et cetera. So
Right.
mostly we do these because there are issues that we have that we want to be able to address. And both Leslie and I, there are things that we have. I mean, to tell you, when you get to be my age, how you handle your sexuality is a real issue. And
That's touched on in this movie, Away from Her.
yeah,
It's very interesting.
and so
Unusual.
so it's interesting. I want to do that, and then Leslie's stuff is more with her work, how she feels so disempowered as a woman, a writer today.
Marilyn Bernard asks, having seen you in your exquisite performance in Rose, how do you prepare for a one something play?
I'm telling you, that rehearsal period changed me as an actress. It totally changed me. First of all, because it all had to be towards the audience.
Right.
You know, I mean, first of all, you have to take I had to take my shoes off because it was sitting shiver. So the director, no, even started. She says, Olympia, we have to figure out why you even sit down. So that was the first couple of days, improvisations. Me trying to get to the bench, trying to figure out why I got to the bench. And then finally, it came to me why I went to the bench. Okay. So then I had to take my shoes off, and I felt so vulnerable without my shoes. I wouldn't give up my shoes. So I said, well, can I keep them in the first week? Okay. Then she would say, but now, Olympia, you've got to look out. It's all to the audience. And I was like, and I didn't want to do that. And she started to bring in people to make me look at them, and it was like a nightmare, getting myself to get out to them. I had learned 64 pages before I got there, because I knew I'd never get it in 5 weeks. I thought it's too much. But the good thing about that was that I learned it logically, like, oh, I said this, well, that's why. Well, why do I say that? And why do I go to that? And I didn't, you know. And it felt like I had eaten the play. I literally ate it. That, even, there was no interpretation at all. I just worked on it on the literal level of it, you know. And because I thought, let me just get the lines. How am I going to get the lines I have to do just on the literal level? And then the first time I had a horrible experience. Again, the second night. I'm there. She insisted I had one of those things in my ears. So the first night I didn't even use it. I thought, look at me. I did it. Second night, I'm like a page in, and this was the experience. It was like a well. And my body went forward. I went, ah. And I pitched into a black well. I had no idea anything about the script. And I did something I never did. I looked up at the audience. I said, I'm up. There was nobody to save me. There was nobody to crunch. And I didn't know what to. And I got up, and I left the stage. The audience did not leave. I went to the stage manager. And she said, well, nothing was coming through, and it was busted. So I said, well, you have to stand close to the curtain so that if I need the line. She said, okay, okay. And then I said to her, I said, okay, what should I do? Should I go back and talk to the audience? She said, no, just go in and sit down. The Brits go up a lot. British audiences are used to it. And the Brits laugh about it, the actors laugh about it, the audience, sits and listens to the lines coming in. I mean, they have a different relationship to theater than we do. So I went in, and I sat, and they waited for me. That audience did not go back. I don't know how many minutes I was gone. And I sat, the moment I sat down, they burst into applause. I started to cry. I couldn't believe how accepting they had been of me. Mm-hmm. It was like I had these incredible experiences doing it. Yeah. The learning all that, mm-hmm. holding that her life emotionally. Mm-hmm. The audiences giving me that kind of support, it was like, it literally changed me as an actress.
Well, that was the second part of the question, actually. How different were the reactions of the American audience and the British?
Oh, well, the Americans laugh more.
Oh, they do?
Because the Jews and this is a generalization, but I don't think there'll be many Brits who would contradict me. They're more assimilated. Mm-hmm. We came here to New York. The laughter was raucous. I always knew when there were Jews in the house. Always knew it. And also, they were political. They would yell at me, "This is bullshit." And they would walk up and yell at me. They would leave, stomping up the aisle. Oh my God, they were like, it was really, and what you might call the AAA Jews did not necessarily embrace this play. Because of the political stuff,
Right, right. Okay, John Weigand, is that right? John, anyway, aside from talent and beauty, what would you most attribute to your success?
Tenacity.
Once again.
Yeah.
Here's an anonymous one. Any weird jobs before your career break?
Yeah. I hustled dance for Arthur Murray. I would be on the telephones trying to get people to take dance. Things like that. Of course, I was a waitress, like everybody else. I think that I was somebody's personal assistant. I did a lot of different things.
Cam asks, what do you suggest to keep up our spirits during times of unemployment?
Work. Keep doing stuff. Mm-hmm. Get together with people. Do something. Find a bar someplace and do readings. Just
keep going.
Go forth.
Alan Gary, Tales of the City was one of the best miniseries ever.
Oh.
And spawned a sequel, actually 2 sequels. Any plans for another that you know of?
Interestingly enough, the sequels were all Canadian. The first one, listen to this, the first one was done by the Brits, Channel 4. PBS took it, incredible, scandalous reactions in Washington. There was frontal nudity with men. They never mind frontal nudity with women, but now we want frontal nudity with men.
Right.
Oh no, that was not good. and the men were gay. That was even worse. And Jesse Helms went to town, and extreme right groups cut out all the intimacy things in the thing, put them together, and sent it as a video to the senator saying, "This is what you're funding PBS to do," and PBS withdrew its support. Instead, they took Prime Suspect, which was only about pedophilia, other things,
But no
and this is
male
young
frontal.
people trying to find themselves and their place in life. And decades in San Francisco. You know?
Right, right. Jeff Woods Gallen, how did you find a balance between work and family, especially when your kids were little?
Not easy. The best one, is this a man that asked this
man
question?
asked that
That's
one, yes.
interesting.
I found
it's-
that interesting
Usually
too.
the women ask
Right,
that question.
exactly.
It's who you marry, number one. Yeah, I think it's an important thing. It's got to be somebody who's, I mean, with this much used word, partner. Who, when you're working, will do everything and without griping and carrying on, and when he's working, you'll do everything, and she's working, whatever. And that's helpful. The kids have to, you know, we're all given a set of parents, and there are things we like and things that we don't like, and your kids will have the things in you and the life you offer them, what they like and they don't like. Mm-hmm. And there are things that you'll make possible for them, and there are things that'll be difficult. There were times when both my husband and I were working. We tried not to do that. We did our best not to do that. But there were times you couldn't avoid it, you know. And then but for us, what happened was that accident. Mm-hmm. It just, we almost lost the house, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. And then you live with certain regrets. People say, oh, I have no regrets. There are people who say that. I cannot believe that they had a life without regrets. I mean, it's just hard for me to buy that. But I'm assuming, I mean, they say it, I'm assuming it's true. I don't, you know, but there are regrets, you know.
Right. I'm going to end with this one. Emilio Delgado asks, what was your greatest challenge as an actor?
Well, Rose. Rose was the greatest. That was the most.
Most challenging.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Oh, thanks.